Good morning, everyone. So as I was reminded last night, we're in the middle of doing evil in this faith. Maybe to phrase this a little better, we're in the middle of discussing the concept of evil. Sorry. Apologies. Okay. So I think, it's a big topic by definition, and it's a sensitive one, as I said last time. Because obviously beyond being a sort of theoretical philosophical discussion, it's one that impacts on our lives, both in terms of the personal decisions we make and in terms of the difficult experiences we go through. And we began discussing it last week. But I think I concluded just by speaking a bit about the etymology of the. I think I began by saying that the concept of good and evil is not synonymous with halacha, and we discussed that at length. But whilst obviously there's a correlation between the halachic system and good and evil, it's possible to technically keep all halacha and nonetheless be a menovel b'rishus haTorah, or be someone who's not yosher v'tov. And similarly, there are rare occasions acknowledged, interestingly, both by the philosophers and the Mekabalim, in which the good thing to do could, in theory, be counter to halacha, but nonetheless, in subscribing and bowing to a covenant at Sinai, to Kabbalah haTorah, we sort of submit to the halachic system, even where we could construct theoretical discrepancies, at least between the two. It's possible there could be things that would be good for us to do, and nonetheless we can't, because we're bound by halacha, and therefore net, I guess, it wouldn't be good, because it would be a rebellion against our commitment, a breach of our commitment to Hashem. I then concluded just by looking at the etymology of the word good, tov v'ra, and we saw two linked etymologies. The first one is linking tov to that which is functional and ra to that which is broken. And you see this in Hebrew. You see tov as functional, for example, hatavat hanerot, the preparation of the lights, the lamps for the menorah lighting in the Beis Hamikdash was called hatava. They were made functional when you put in the wicks and the oil and you sort of straighten it up and set it up. So setting something up in Hebrew is referred to as hatava. And in the cognate language of Aramaic, that which is broken is referred to as ru'ah. So for example, a sulam ru'ah, a broken ladder is referred to as ru'ah. So ru'ah means broken. And I pointed out that in many ways this is in every language, or I don't know, every language, but certainly English is also like this. If you talk about a good table, you mean it functions well as a table. It does what tables should be. You don't mean a moral component to the goodness of the table. You simply mean it's a functioning table. So similarly, when you talk about that's with an object. The table doesn't have a moral component to it. So good just means it tables away in the way that tables should table. With human beings, when we talk about good human, we mean a moral human, because we humans are meant to be moral beings, and therefore to be a good human, to be a functional human, means one who's making the correct moral decisions. So in and of in itself, tov and ra don't have a moral component. A sulam ru'ah, this broken ladder, it may be good that it's broken. Maybe I broke it to save someone's life, but all I mean is it's a dysfunctional ladder. It's a ladder that doesn't that is broken, that doesn't do what it's meant to do. So this is one etymology of tov and ra. And perhaps a related etymology of tov ra means that which is detached or disconnected, or the other in some shape or form, a fragment. And a famous example of this is a haftal reya hakmocha. So a friend, a reya, is referred to as a reya, reish ayin, the same etymological root, reya. The haftal reya hakmocha means treat one who is an other the same as you treat yourself. Treat one who is detached, kamocha, as you do one who is attached. So again, ra there would mean, it's interesting to think that the word reya, friend, and ra are etymologically linked, but so suggests the etymologists, the grammarians, meaning what it's really saying is treat one who is detached from me in the same way as I treat myself. So what does this, so thus far etymology, what does this tell us philosophically? So the first meaning tells us that one way of thinking about ra is that it's dysfunctionality, and tov is functionality. In other words, when I function well as a human, I do that which is moral. Or to put it differently, if I experience events in my life which I perceive as ra, I perceive them as limiting or inhibiting or damaging my ability to function as a human. which is not a bad working definition of events that I experience as Ra as evil. If someone undergoes, all of us undergo at different stages in our life, ill health or financial troubles or relationship difficulties or whatever it may be, all of them, what I'm really saying is I'm undergoing a Ra experience. I'm undergoing an experience which inhibits my ability to achieve things that I want to achieve and to function in the way that I want to function. And when I describe something as toiv, as good, I mean I'm able to do that which I want to do. I'm able to function in the way that I want to function. I can achieve my goals, or fulfill my ambitions, or have the experiences that I want to have. So that's in terms of the Ra and Tov that I undergo. It's functionality and dysfunctionality, and that's in terms also of the decisions I make, whether they're decisions that enhance my goal or whether they're decisions that inhibit my goals. So from a Torah perspective, which cares about morality, doing Tov is and believes that's at the essence of what human goals should be. So Tov means doing decisions which achieve spiritual or moral outcomes, and Ra is decisions which breach those. This, by the way, is the pshat in the pasuk in Bereshis when Hashem looks at creation, Vaya Elokim ki tov, right? He looks at everything he makes, and each stage he sees that it's Tov. In other words, he sees that it's functional. It does that which it's meant to do. When he looks at the creation of the separation between the dry lands and the sea, and Vayaki Tov, he looks at completion of his day's work and says this is good. What he means is this is functional. This is achieved at what it's meant to be. The sea sees and the land lands, and it does what they're meant to do, and has created an environment which is one stage closer to being fit for the stage upon which human beings can operate. So this is one level of the meaning of Tov and Ra. The second level of meaning takes us a little bit more profound, and as I said, it means detached. Now, it could be that means on a simple basic level that which is disconnected or detached is broken. So a sulam ru'ah, broken ladder, is broken because presumably the rungs are detached from the sides of the ladder, whatever that's called, the poles of the ladder, and they're broken or whatever. So the detachedness, the fragmentation that's inherent in the word Ra may be connected to the dysfunctionality of it. But another way of putting it, a more profound way of putting it, is it's detached from its purpose. So it's detached from its goal. It's dysfunctional. That which is dysfunctional isn't just physically broken, that the rungs of the ladder have come apart, but it's detached conceptually. It's broken from its purpose. Or to put that in the terms of the Ra and Tov that we experience in this world, one way of thinking about it is that Ra is that which is detached from godliness, and Tov is that which is attached to godliness. Or to say that one stage deeper, Ra is that which is detached from God. So here we arrive at the sort of classic philosophical formulation of Ra as that which is removed from God. If we think of Olam Chesed Yibon as the world as an outpouring of kindness from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we all thankfully experience much kindness in our lives. In fact, very nature of us existence itself is an act of kindness. Then Ra is when there's a barrier or a break or a rupture in that flow of chesed. So we've arrived through the etymology from a sort of more pragmatic definition of Ra as that which is broken, through to that which is detached because it's detached from its purpose, through to how the Mekubalim speak about it as Ra being an interruption in the flow of divine goodness. So in that sense, Hashem doesn't create evil. All evil is where there's a block to the flow of divine goodness. And I think we've used this metaphor before. That one way of thinking about our role as human beings in the language of the Mekubalim is to be a keli, to be a utensil, to be a vessel, a recipient of the flow of goodness, of the shefa of goodness that's in the world. And when we make wise and good and spiritual decisions, we make ourselves better kli kibble, better receptacles for the divine flow. Then modern analogy, I guess, would be that we're aware that we live on a planet in which there's a constant outpouring of energy from the sun. We'd but have to capture it. If we built enough, this is not a political point, an environmental point, just a dramatic point, but if we built enough receptacles to receive the energy of the sun, enough solar panels, then we would, there's plenty of energy, there's no shortage of energy around. It's simply our ability to harness it, to capture it, which limits us. So it's the same really in life. Our role is to make ourselves kalim, fit receptacles, in order to receive the divine flow. How do we make ourselves receptacles? Well, sometimes overtly, through the act of recognizing that we exist as kalim, as utensils who are meant to receive that which is good, and sometimes less overtly through making ourselves better fit for purpose. By the way, the limitation in the analogy of the utensil mashal is, of course, that the very existence of the utensil itself is part of the gift. So it's not that I exist, I'm a utensil, and I now have to receive divine flow, but the very existence of myself as a keli, as a receptacle of goodness, is itself part of the divine good. So, for example, when I daven, in acknowledging that my helplessness, in acknowledging my vulnerability, in acknowledging my responsibility to use that which I get for good purposes, in acknowledging my hodah, my submission and thanks and appreciation to Hashem, which is really what tefillah is. If you look at tefillah, that's what it gets broken down to: acceptance of vulnerability, acceptance of need, acceptance of responsibility to use for good, and hodah, bowing and submission and thanking. If I do all that, basically what I've done is I've carved myself into a better receptacle to receive divine good. When I make a bracha, I'm doing the same thing. I'm taking the food item and I'm seeing it as a vehicle for awareness of the divine, for awareness of Hashem. So that's when I overtly make myself into a better keli. And then the other type of mitzvahs which I do are molding me into being a better keli. So if I make myself into a greater Baal Chesed, if I make myself into a more kadosh, into a more person who transcends better physicality, a more holy person, a more godly person, if I mold myself into a more moral being, I'm thus making myself into a vehicle for godliness in the world. When we talk about a human being becoming mahu chanun afatahe chanun, imitatio deo, right? Deo, becoming godlike. What we mean is, another way of putting it is, I become a better pipe, a better vehicle for the divine energies, for the Shefa of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is where we get to all the Kabbalistic metaphors, the metaphors in the Mekubalim of the tzinoros, the pipes of divine energy and flow, and the Shefa and kindness from Hashem. This is all connected with this idea that disconnect is evil. Evil finds its place when there is a rupture and a break of the flow of divine chesed and energy. So this is So here we get to the paradox of existence, that Hashem has shared of his existence with us, and he's given us control through the gift or responsibility of free will to mold the world. So we have responsibility for the world, tikkun olam. It doesn't just mean environmental lobbying. It means taking responsibility for perfecting the world, for making the world a better place. In other words, repairing it. This is again the metaphor of the Mekubalim. They mean something subtly different to this, but for our purposes, I won't go into this distinction. They talk about the shavuras kelim, the rupturing of the utensils, and they see the whole world as this divine drama, almost, or story of trying to repair these broken utensils, these broken kelim. Now, what led to the shattering of the kelim is a different part of the story, which at least for now I'm not going to go into. Maybe I'll go into it later. I'll make a note. But it's beyond the scope of where we are up to in our thinking. But we have a responsibility to that's the gift of human choice. This is the Hasidic tale, which I think I told last Rosh Hashanah about. It's a well-known tale in which a Rabbi turns to his Talmud, the Kotzka, they say it's in the name of, and he says to his student, Hasidic Rabbi, "Where is God?" And he says, "What do you mean, Rabbi? He's everywhere." And again, the Rabbi asks, "Where is God?" And he says, "Everywhere." The third time, the Rabbi looks at him and says, "Where is God?" And this time, the student realizes that his answer is wrong, and he keeps quiet. The Rabbi says, "Wherever you let him, wherever you allow him in." In other words, we don't have control of much of this universe within which we live, but we have a degree of control over one narrow space, the space of our minds, and we choose whether to allow Hashem's presence into that or not. That's the gift of free will. Which this is the power of the Kabbalistic metaphor, and the daunting and awesome responsibility. This is where yirah, fear, comes in, and awe comes in Kabbalistic thinking, because it's a scary thought. We can chase God out of this world, right? We can make this place a godlessness realm. Really, the idea comes in the Gemara, right? The Gemara says there's no space in the world for me and an arrogant person. Whoever is angry as if they worship idols. Well, the Gemara, so the core idea is really a very classic Jewish idea that we have the ability to drive God out of the world. The Kabbalah looks at the Gemara. I'm sorry, looks at the 10. The Medrash looks at the 10 sins, so the 10 sins that humans did, which chased Hashem out of the world, and the slow reversal of that and the return of Hashem. The parshas that we read in these weeks, right? For Osinu Mikdash, make for me a sanctuary, and I will be present. I will dwell in your midst. In other words, we have the choice whether we allow Hashem to dwell within us. In you. We have the choice whether we allow Hashem to dwell within us or not. That's whether we make of ourselves Lavovi Mishkan Evner, right? Whether we make of ourselves a Mishkan, a temple, a place of residence of presence of the divine or not. So that's the fear of that's where Yira comes in. That's where we talk about Ahava and Yira, two modes of relating to Hashem. Ahava means love, a sense of the presence and awareness and connection. Yira means a sense of fear and awe, because I'm aware that this connection has a fragility to it and I can break it and rupture it. When you're afraid of something, it's because you're afraid of breaking, of ra, of evil, of vulnerability. And every relationship needs an element of Yira to it also, which is an awareness the relationship is vulnerable. I can destroy it if I mess things up, and I need to work on building it. But yeah.
Suggesting that this formation will be something person functioning as he should do, which is in a good way.
Yes.
This idea you're relying on having to be expected to be.
Correct. So in this definition of good, we're saying goodness is that which connects me to Hashem, and evil is that which disconnects.
In this more profound.
Yes, that's yes. Yeah. That's.
Where he did not bring it about, but it was some kind of presupposition that human beings should be functions to do.
You're correct. So all I pointed out was that the words tov and ra, good and evil, it can be used in a morally neutral sense. It just simply means that a good table is a table that functions as a table. Whether it's doing good by functioning as a table, whether it's the desk of a monster or the table of a tzaddik, that's a moral question. But the meaning of the word simply means functionality or dysfunctionality.
You're defining the functioning, the appropriate functionality.
No, so that's stage two. Then stage two is then okay. So what a table can be tov and ra. Similarly, a human can be tov and ra, and we would understand that to mean godliness or the like. Right, it's the second stage, yeah. Yeah.
You're saying when something bad happens, that is therefore either punishment or natural result of bad behavior.
No. I'm simply saying that when we no, so I'm going to come on to that. In fact, I'll address that in a second now. That maybe that's the next point we can go on to. I'm simply pointing out that when we make a tov or ra decision, we're making a decision that makes ourselves or the world more or less functional. And when we experience tov and ra, we are experiencing that which makes us more or less able to function, more or less able to achieve our goals or do that which we want. In a sense, it's not very profound. It's just formulating what we sort of know instinctively anyway. An event that happens to us which we describe as bad is one that blocks things that we want to achieve. An event that we describe as good is one that allows us to do everything that we want to do. Now, so that's stage one. Stage two is in the language of the Mekabolim, who link this to the idea of connect and disconnect. What we mean by that which is bad is that which is removed from godliness. What we mean by that which is good is that which is linked to godliness. Why individuals experience bad and good things is the next discussion. Okay, so in the classic, so how do we deal with bad and good things that occur to us? So in classic philosophy, I think it's easier to understand human-generated evil, given this model that we've discussed, as opposed to seemingly natural evil. evil which is generated by people, we understand this is the responsibility and the privilege and the curse of free will. We can choose to make the world a better or worse place, and thus suffer the consequences. Is the individual recipient of that evil directly responsible for the difficult experiences they undergo in such circumstances? This really ties into our previous discussion in which we discussed the limits of bechira and free will, and whether it's possible that my bad choices can affect you. Listen to the recordings of that discussion. So when I undergo a negative experience, either generated by human free will, I do need to ask myself the question, whose free will? It could be my free will. Maybe I'm responsible for some of the decisions I've made which lead me into this mess, in which case I understand directly the causal chain. Or maybe this is a result of someone else's decisions, in which case we get into discussion about to what degree someone else's bechira can affect me. More profoundly, we also need to always analyze whether the bad or negative event that I'm undergoing is indeed something that's bad. Maybe if I understood my life's purpose and life's mission, I would realize that this wasn't a negative. Because I think all of us would agree, for example, that having easy financial stability is good, and suffering and struggling financially is a challenge, can be very painful, can affect what we see as our life path. But maybe there's advantages in also. Sometimes wealth can be a curse. Sometimes having things easy can be a disadvantage. Sometimes the need to struggle forces us to achievements. Sometimes the need to struggle makes us deal with life's challenges in certain ways, removes human hubris. It could be that part of life's mission is redefining what I see as how my life ought to be. In other words, when I jump to the conclusion that an event is a bad event, maybe that's because I think I'm the master of what my life plan should be. And part of that is accepting that I'm meant to have a different life plan. So people go through a financial challenge. People go through experiences of waiting for that for which they long, and life doesn't go smoothly, and I'm achieving that goal. And maybe this is part of the path of life. Maybe this is where they need to be. And maybe there's growth and positive experiences that emerge from that. But in and of in itself, if something is genuinely bad, if it's indeed a negative, a dysfunctionality, a cessation of that which ought to be there, if it's generated by human free will, I think we find it a little easier to understand in this concept, because we understand this is either my or other people's decisions to block the solar panels, to stop the keli, to stop the reception of chesed from HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
You say the same thing about health, you said about finance.
I think also around health, yeah. There are chazals around health and unhealth. They speak about till the time of the Ovis, people being ageless until they dropped dead, and the tefillah of Yaakov for aging, the tefillah for ill health. Maybe ill health also. Again, I want to be careful here, because it's very easy sitting here in the comfort of a good life, thankfully, here in Northwest London, and speaking casually about grave difficulties and so on. But the reality is, and again, I don't want to be trite around any of this, because these are profoundly painful and difficult things. But there are people that go through very serious challenges, health or finance or the like, and obviously by definition, it's when people emerge from these, they're often able to say this. But sometimes even when they're going through it, they're able to say, actually, there's positives I've drawn out of this, of appreciation, of empathy, of understanding. Like life, every moment of life seems richer now. I'm actually working and investing more in positive relationships that matter, that previously I neglected, because I'm aware of the fragility of my life and the limitations of it. The reality is, whether we, without getting too gloomy about it, whether we like thinking about it or not, we all have only finite existence here on Earth. And because we forget that, we neglect things that really matter to us. So having a reminder of that fragility, that limitation, is not necessarily a bad thing always. Ill health, in a sense, certain types of ill health, merely brings an awareness of the imminent cessation of life more to the forefront of our consciousness, which is not necessarily in and of in itself a bad thing. So really, I guess here, just because of how the conversations are concerned, we're merging two separate ideas. Point number one is, when we undergo bad experiences, we need to challenge ourselves, and this is very difficult, as to whether this is really Ra in the sense of a dysfunctionality, or whether I have my self-definition of functionality as a mistaken one. So if, again, we spoke about a table is a good table when it does what tables is meant to do. A human experiences good and is a good human when they do what humans are meant to do. If I have spun myself a narrative of what a human is meant to be and meant to do, which is a false narrative, then I may experience things I'm going through as bad because they rupture my narrative. They create a dysfunctionality in what I think is meant to be my functionality, when in fact it isn't a functionality. So if I buy a futon bed and I don't realize it's a futon bed and I think it's a table, I will say this is a rubbish table. It's a very poor table. I need to realize that this is a bed in order to understand what it's there for. If I spin a vision of human existence about merely being about fun and pleasure and enjoyment and the like, then when I undergo experiences which limit my fun or limit my enjoyment, I may define them as bad experiences. And maybe what's going on over here is I haven't understood that what I thought was a table is a futon bed. I haven't understood that maybe a human is there to achieve other things, that functionality of humanity is something else. So one stage I need to go through is, if Tov and Ra means functionality and dysfunctionality, I always need to question, what is this object in front of me and what is its true functionality? Or what is it to be a human and what is it the true functionality of to be a human? So in a sense, to talk about good and evil, we really need to drill deep, dig deep as to what it means to be a person. Yeah.
So the idea that potentially what we perceive as Ra is a challenge around view or as a perception of our sense of the world. So the possible person
Yes.
Potentially their connection that's basically challenges you to evaluate
Yes, so I will come on to that pasuk. There is a pasuk in Yeshaya Memhei, which Neil just successfully quoted, in which Hashem is referred to as the Borei Ra, the creator of evil. And we'll get to that pasuk. Will we now? But possibly this week, possibly next week. Still, probably next week. But we'll get to that pasuk. But yeah, maybe one way of understanding it is that what we perceive as Ra isn't always Ra, or has behind it a deeper layer of directionality to Tov. Again, I want to emphasize, it's easy to talk philosophy. It's difficult to live these ideas, and I don't mean, God forbid, to trivialize any difficult experiences and suffering that people are going through, other than to say, this is classic philosophy, and this is our understanding of the idea that sometimes, at least, when we go through a Ra experience or an experience that we label as Ra, it's because we've mislabeled or misdefined our functionality as people, and then
major challenges at some point during their life, if not through
their
life. And so we've got all these brachas coming down, and there's much. We've got all these brachas coming down in this pipeline. But for the majority of people, I think, as I say, through a lot of their life, they're not actually receiving them. But what you're saying is they are, in a sense, receiving them. It's just they don't understand what's happening to them. Or if they do understand what's happening to them, they have to think about how they can improve their particular. But the net result is that the majority of people are suffering bad things, whether it's health, finance, or whatever. It just makes the whole thing a bit difficult to.
I think again, I'm conscious these are very painful subjects for all of us in our own way, because we all face grave, as you said, face grave difficulties and challenges. I think there's a number of points over here. The first is, I think there's two statements which are both true. The first is undoubtedly your statement that the majority of people go through significant challenges for significant parts of their lives. It's equally true, though, to say that even in these periods of significant challenge, that there's an overwhelming goodness that they are experiencing. So whilst they are going through a challenge to their finance, they may also be experiencing love and relationships and nachas and good health. And whilst they're going through a challenge to their good health, they may also be experiencing good medical care and nachas and livelihood. In other words, it gets back to, I know no particular words of wisdom to offer, then it gets back to a choice to some degree, whether we see the cup as half full or half empty. And even when we're going through difficulties, there's still an enormous amount of good in our lives. again, I don't want to speak about things which are way beyond my experience or my competency or ability even to say. But when you speak to some of the incredible and remarkable people who survived in own recent histories, some of the most tragic and terrible experiences, the Holocaust and the like, many of them speak about this, about the thing that helped them move on was when they were able to focus on the good and the brachas they had, and our ability to cope as humans and to move on is by looking at even in tough times what very often is overwhelming blessing and goodness. But it's very challenging to do that. So this is the first point I'll make, that yeah, you're right. I think both halves of the statements are true. That much of our time we go through difficulties, and nonetheless, even in those difficult times, there's still a lot of good. And the second point is, to a degree, as we experience difficulties, we do need to see the good in them, and perhaps redefine what we think is the purpose of our life and what we're meant to achieve. Maybe the purpose of our life is to struggle with this particular with health or finance, and nonetheless to live a good life within this. Again, this is really classics of Medrash and so on, the Gam Zulatov of Rabbi Kiva, right? This is also for the good. We're taught this constantly by our tradition, by our Masorah, but it's very, very difficult to achieve, and that's why to some degree I'm uncomfortable talking philosophy about these ideas, because it's easy to philosophize and hard to live. But certainly, at least, but I'm not saying this is all that evil is, otherwise there'd be no point in the share. But certainly one stage of what we need to reflect on when we undergo what we see as Toiv and Ra is to ask ourselves, what is the real functionality over here? What are we really meant to achieve? And by the way, it cuts both ways. We could be going through experiences that we perceive as sheer Toiv, as absolute goodness. And if we would ponder a little more closely, maybe we'd realize, yes, but this is completely misaligning ourselves from our purpose in life. So maybe we have an incredible success, or achieve a goal, or get a new job, and we see this as Tov, as something absolutely good. If we really focus, we realize it's going to completely distort our work-life balance and take us away from other things that matter to us. So I think we get more prodded into thinking when we undergo that which we perceive as bad rather than that which we perceive as good. But both halves really need the same equation. There is a Ramban in I think in Shar Gamul, in which he speaks about a thoroughly corroded individual. And I'm just using this as a metaphor. I'm not claiming this explains the whole of the Yom Noraim, but just as a thought experiment sort of thing. If we isolate all other factors, he speaks about a thoroughly corroded individual who is so distant from any spirituality and any spiritual achievement that Hashem says, I'm just going to give the guy a good year. Like, what's the point of him undergoing any difficulties or struggles, any prods to rethink and reflect? This guy's just drifted. This is so empty of any just a bit lump of biomass, really. They'll just enjoy a good year. The person then goes through a Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, and something begins stirring in this person's soul, and something begins moving. They begin thinking a little bit. And Hashem says, you know what, this person's engaged in a very meaningful period of reflection. There's something beginning to stir in this person of perhaps potential that this person can be brought back to spirituality. I'm now going to decree on this fellow a terrible year. And it can get every difficult in the world. And maybe this will wake him up to a bit more spiritual growth. So Ramban just does this as a spiritual sort of thought experiment. He says, you can daven and shit on Rosh Hashanah and Kippur and really engage in Shiva, and you can succeed in being zoicha b'din, in meriting good judgment, that now you're going to have a terrible year rather than the good year you should have previously had. Now, the point of the Ramban's thought experiment is because he's trying to tell us we have to be more sophisticated in what we think of as a good or evil outcome, and what's going on in the Yom Noraim. So again, I recognize that thought experiment is complicated. Life is more complicated than that. There's many factors. But as a principle, yes, there's a truth in that. Sometimes we need to re-challenge ourselves about what we experience as good and what we experience as poor. Maybe I won't say this for shame on, at least not on camera being recorded. I met someone on Flint Street about 3 years ago whose words ring in my ear to this day. And this was an individual who really had been blessed by Kadosh Baruch Hu with every bracha possible, a beautiful family and great material wealth and a charismatic personality that people warm to, exceptionally popular individual. And they'd just undergone a personal tragedy. A few months before that, they had lost their child in a very, very tragic way. And I met this person in the street and said good Shabbos and talking a little bit. And then he said to me words which ring in my ear. he said to me, I didn't question and challenge and ask of God when times were going well. So why should I start challenging and asking of God when times are going difficult with difficulty? And those words ring in my ear because I think they were very heartfelt. And again, I'm not making any judgments for any of us who don't think that way, and maybe this person does go through ups and downs. I'm not trying to be naive about it, but at that point in time, at least for this individual, the words rang very true in there. To me, they rang very true. And he said, I went through decades of my life when everything was just an absolute blessing and good, and at no one time did I stop and say, God, why me? So he said, now that this tragedy has struck, who am I to turn to God at this point and say, why me? So there's a truth to that also. So that's at least one reflection that we need to go through as we think about Tov. What if it means functionality, that which is aligns with life's purpose or my functionality? We know what a table's purpose is, but do we really know what a human's purpose is? And before we label something as Tov, we need to ask ourselves that. Yeah.
How does it connect to something actually inherently, as opposed to an experience, or perhaps relating to the idea of God creating is even something which is material?
Yeah. So I will come to this later, but just in direct answer to the question, those on camera asked me to repeat questions also. The question was, what about things that are inherently evil as opposed to that which is experienced as evil? So inherently evil, we see as only something that carries moral content, which is a decision made by a moral free agent. If something is not a moral free agent, it can't do that which is inherently evil. It can only do that which is functionally evil. Intrinsic evil is that which is morally chosen, and the only morally free agents of which we are aware in existence are ourselves as humans and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Those are moral free agents. But we'll get to this on a deeper and more profound and fuller discussion. Yes, Lennon, sorry.
So if a child who was born in Egypt in the height of
the exile, yes,
and they were there for hundreds of years, this kid has only seen sorrows, and he's born into a situation certainly not of his own making, or some of the kids in Africa, where they're born into an area
of just ongoing struggle.
How for them, as it were, how do you square the circle on such a situation for their existence where nothing is of their own making? This is where they've been planted in, and for them, it certainly would seem.
So again, it's a very powerful question, and I'm very uncomfortable sitting here in the bourgeois comforts of Northwest London and talking about what children growing up in deprived parts of the world are meant to do. But your question is a fair one, and the most I can do is quote someone who went through some of the most hellish experiences imaginable for humans, and wrote about this in what's a very Jewish work, and he was a Jewish man, a very Jewish work, Viktor Frankl, in which he sort of makes this point, and I'm just really paraphrasing him in different language. And he says that using our terminology, I'm going to misquote him, but I'm going to translate what he said into our language. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and ultimately he argues that if we ask what's the functionality of a human, we know what the functionality of his table is. What's the functionality of a human? So he says it's to find meaning, to achieve that of absolute worth. And he said meaning is found in the internal perspective of our minds. And therefore, even when everything else is stolen from us, the perspective we bring to bear on the situation is the one thing that remains in our ownership. The perspective that we bring to bear on the situation. And I'm aware, by the way, this doesn't necessarily resolve situations which people's perspective is altered in cases of challenges to mental health and the like. So I don't think there's any one answer that can deal with every situation. But in many situations, the perspective that we bring to a situation is what is in our control. And he says this is man's search for meaning. And he says it's in and of in itself, perhaps man can achieve all the full range of human achievements and human goals and human purpose, even in the most deprived and barbaric conditions, with a smile they choose to give someone else as they pass them in the work groups, with a nod of greeting to someone, with a crust of bread that's shared. So at the harshest, philosophy does have a very raw message to it sometimes. And at the harshest, he says, and all I can do is but quote, because how can I say this when I live a life that's so far removed from these values? But he says, at its harshest and rawest, when we push ourselves to what a human being is, maybe a human can experience only tov, only good, even in the most tough situation, because if we really ask ourselves what is a human meant to achieve, they can do everything in that realm. He says there in the camps, I experienced my ability to achieve everything that was meaningful for human beings to achieve. I experienced relationships, I experienced love, I experienced the ability to give, I experienced to bring perspective, and therefore the full range of what a human needed to be, could be achieved there in these awful situations. So this is a very raw and tough message. I can simply share what others have said because I can't say it myself.
Yeah, I'm reasonably well aware of what was going on, and to as much as I can do. But in Mitzrayim, where there are hundreds of years where no one knew any different other than harsh oppression, this child, how would a child there, yes, he could be a nice person, whatever, but at the end of the day, his perception, he's been put in, this may be where the world plan is crossing over to, because that's part of a world plan, what's going on in Mitzrayim. And
I don't know enough about the situation there, and I can't say anything other than I can only quote a Viktor Frankl who argues that even a whole life lived under these circumstances has within it, and even a short life under these circumstances has within it everything a human is meant to achieve. I spoke about this. Sorry. Yeah.
For him, the idea of free choice as part of humanity was very important. So he says in the book that he would decide. He said there was effectively, in a global terms, no free choice. But he would decide free choice for himself, and which foot he would get out of bed in the morning.
Yes.
And he'd change it from day to day in order that he felt that he retained his humanity and his free choice.
Do you know, you're in saying that line, you've just given me insight into something that I happen to have been speaking to someone about yesterday, and therefore it's on my mind. There is a very difficult halacha, set of halachas at the beginning of Shulchan Aruch, which speaks about which foot we should move first, which hand we should move first, which shoelaces we should tie up, and it's very difficult to understand. And there's various symbolisms given to some of the decisions. It's very difficult to understand what these halachas are really about. And based on your quote from Viktor Frankl, I'm wondering if it's telling us that even just the choice of which foot to put forward first in the march, which foot to get out of bed first, which shoelace to tie up, is an expression ultimately of the peak of human fulfillment and our ability to choose. If we think of if as Viktor Frankl argues, and this is in line with the thinking of the Mekabalim, no doubt, the essence of humans is the ability to choose, and even if everything else is taken away from us, we have choice over how we view, and as a choice over the most trivial action. Maybe this is the way we're meant to wake up in the morning, and along with a Moed Ani, we're meant to appreciate the most trivial act of the day. So I genuinely thank you from the bottom of my heart for that insight, because what this is telling us is that as we do up our shoelaces, we're meant to be aware that that's an expression of free will, and that we're meant to appreciate that gift of being able to do up our shoelaces. So that's a very, very beautiful idea. You know, I have to confess, I've struggled my whole life with this Stephen Shulchan Aruch. I've never understood it, and I think what you're saying is it suddenly makes us into a meditative experience, doesn't it? You remember the halacha as you do up your shoelace, and you realize that even a trivial act like which foot you move first and which arm you lift first is an act of freedom, and an act that has meaning within it if you choose to find meaning with it. So we start our day with reminding ourselves that the most trivial of acts has potential meaning to it. Thank you.
Like we always think we get up in the morning in the expectation that you can maybe put one foot in front of the other, that.
That's the bracha.
Yeah.
In the morning.
And we know there are people that wake up in the morning and unfortunately that morning can't put one leg in front of another. Yeah. So as I'm saying, we indeed say that in Bechas HaShachar, no doubt. But before Bechas HaShachar, before Bechevim and Zokev Kufavim, just by that to waking up, that's what we're meant to wake up in bed and say the Moed Ani, right? Those are meant to be our first words. You're giving me chizuk to strengthen these halachas, because I have to confess, as I said, they're definitely challenging halachas for me. Thank you.
You are taking the opposite perspective to come to the same conclusion, because we've talked about Richard Brandon's talking about this independence. A free choice to choose which
Yeah. He says the point, even when that's taken away, even when it's the most trivial, it can't be stolen from us, the most basic. There always remains something that's left. Again, I can only the problem with dealing with these issues is because we're talking about heroes of spirit that manage to think this way. I read an interview of a quadruple amputee, a soldier in, I think, in the British Army, who was interviewed, who lived a life of just really happiness and almost, you know, positivity and energy and goodwill. And they said to him, how can you live this way? I read this in the newspaper a while back. It's been quite a while back because I think it was in the days when there were still newspapers, but it's many years ago. And he said, I don't think it was online, but who knows? He said that he said, look, I can choose how I live. Why shouldn't I be happy? I can breathe, I can see, I can smell, I can hear, I can take a breath, I can experience love, I can give love. So what's there not to be happy about? Now again, I feel profoundly uncomfortable saying these things when I moan when you know when I, you know, when my coffee is the wrong texture or whatever it is. But it doesn't make it less true to remind ourselves of these things. So stage one of what we need to ask ourselves always is, if Tov and Ra, just to conclude, we've run out of our time, if Tov and Ra means functionality and dysfunctionality, we always need to be careful that we're defining the term correctly. What is human functionality meant to be? What are we humans for? The Torah certainly has messages around that idea. And if we are capable of being heroes of spirit, and it is a harsh, tough push on us, but as Charles said, we're all going to go through difficult times and do go through difficult times, and we can but choose to remind ourselves of what we're really here for, what our purpose in existence really is. And occasionally we have great figures, the Viktor Frankls of the world, this paraplegic soldier, this quadruple right amputee soldier, and the like, who achieve this. And hopefully we can just draw a drop of this into our own lives, if nothing more. But ultimately, as we all live a temporary existence, and we have to confront our mortality. There's no way we can avoid that. And that which we experience as evil is sometimes just mortality staring us more directly in the face, which maybe isn't always a bad thing. Okay, on that very cheerful, also an encouraging note, we'll stop for today. And Emir Hashem, next week I'll try and we'll try and continue a little bit about the philosophy of evil. Okay, sure.